Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nounnan live stream. My name is Adam Hartel. I'll be your host this evening for tonight's event, Behind the Scenes, the VFX of HBO's Peacemaker. I'm really excited for tonight's event. I can't wait to hear what our guests have to share with us and what they have to show us. But before we get into that, I just want to take care of a few things off the top. Number one, I want to thank Lenovo for sponsoring this evening's event. Thanks to Lenovo's sponsorship, Nounnan continues to be able to provide free educational content, live streams, and so forth to you. So special thanks to them. And if you're in need of closed captioning for the stream, you can head over to our Facebook live feed. Just search for Nounnan on Facebook, find our page, and you can watch the live stream there with closed captioning. So with that said, let's get into it. Before I introduce our guest this evening, we have, they provided us with an intro clip that we're going to show you that's going to set us up for what we are going to be talking tonight about. So let's go ahead and roll that.
What's going on, must come down. Baby, I'm losing ground. Bone.
All right, so I cannot wait to get into it tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and read each of our guests' bio, and as I finish each bio, we'll bring that guest on with their webcam where they are located. So first off, Betsy Paterson, who is a visual effects supervisor. Betsy's been a visual effects supervisor in film and television for the past 21 years. Her wealth of experience in CG character creation, combined with an expertise in integrating CG effects into live action settings, make her an ideal collaborator with filmmakers throughout the creative process, from look development to post-production. She's overseen technically complex projects and international crews working on sets with VFX vendors around the world. Betsy recently completed work on the HBO Max series Peacemaker. Prior to that, she was the VFX supervisor for season 1 of the Amazon series Carnival Row. So with that, I want to welcome Betsy to the stream. Hello,
Hi.
thank you for joining us tonight. Yeah,
Great to be
absolutely. Here. Likewise, I'm really excited for what we're going to be doing tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the rest of our guests here.
Sure.
So next up is Jessica Smith, VFX producer. And with over 20 years of experience, Jessica Smith first received a BA in fine art and a BFA in animation prior to beginning her career at an animation studio in Portland, Oregon. A few short years later, she left the Pacific Northwest to pursue a producing career in Los Angeles, initially working directly for VFX vendors on features such as Star Trek Into Darkness, Thor: The Dark World, Hercules, and Star Trek Beyond. Jessica eventually made the move to the client side with season 1 of American Gods. The work on this series earned Jessica her first Emmy nomination in 2017, and since then, Jessica's gone on to lead VFX teams on several memorable series and films, including The Alienist, Lovecraft Country, Lizzie's Story, and the Avatar sequels. Most recently, Jessica completed the HBO Max series Peacemaker with James Gunn and is currently on location producing an upcoming series for Legendary TV. Jessica, welcome to the stream.
Hi,
hello.
nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a lot of fun. The next guest that I'd like to introduce is Jordan Nounnan, visualization supervisor. Born and raised in a small town in Southern California, Jordan grew up loving cartoons and Disney movies, and like most kids. And it wasn't until taking CG design in high school that he realized you could have a career doing this type of stuff. After high school, he decided to attend the Art Institute of California in Los Angeles, majoring in animation to work towards his goal of one day being able to find a job in animation or movies. Upon graduating college in late 2006, a college recruiter connected him with Ron Frankel at Proof, and he's been working with Proof ever since. He's done everything from working as a Pre-Vis and Postvis artist doing visual effects for commercials and music videos, and now supervising Pre-Vis and Postvis teams on big budget Hollywood movies. Notable credits include Peacemaker, Shazam, The Suicide Squad, Avatar, The Way of Water, and Black Adam. Jordan, welcome to the stream. Thank you
Hi,
for being
nice
with
to
us.
be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last but certainly not least, we have Ranko, Tadic, Visualization Supervisor. After being drawn to creative work from a young age, inspired by animation, VFX, and games, Ranko studied animation at the Art Institute of California in Los Angeles and entered the field of Pre-Vis at Proof. In visualization process from Previs, in years at Proof, in his years at Proofs, he's worked on every aspect of the visualization process from Previs to on-set work to post-vis and finals. Ranko has worked on a variety of projects, including films, episodic commercials, and music videos. His more current credits include Peacemaker, The Suicide Squad, The Atom Project, and Fast and Furious 9. So, Ranko, welcome. Thank you for being here, sir. Wonderful to have you with us. All right, so we've got the whole team assembled, and unfortunately, we didn't do. We've got almost enough people that we could have done the whole intro dance sequence from Peacemaker as we came onto the live stream, but that might have been a bridge too far, especially if I was involved. But guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to what you guys have to share with us. With that, if you guys could kind of just pass the mic and tell us a little bit about yourselves and describe your role on the project, including we heard some of your origin story in your bios, but if you want to share a little bit, kind of what was your gateway into all of this, what inspired you? And,
I guess I'll kick off since we go in the same order we started with. I was the visual effects supervisor for the show, which basically means that I, work with the director, in this case James Gunn, and a few other directors on the various episodes, and develop the project, and then work with the vendors. Proof being one of our main vendors for Pre-Vis and Postvis, and then we worked with Weta and Crafty Apes and a couple of other vendors during post-production, kind of just to polish it all up. So it was all in all I was on it for probably a year and a half, something like that. But awesome. Yeah, it was a great job, a lot of fun.
And could you share with us kind of maybe one of your early inspirations that got you started on the path that led to what you're doing now?
Well, I didn't know the job existed. It didn't really exist when I was a kid. But I've always loved sci-fi. I've always watched whatever movies I could growing up. Close Encounters, E.T., that sort of thing. So I was very drawn to that kind of world. And then as I was in college, I majored in film, but I just sort of kept leaning toward the more art side of it. And then after college, I was working in editorial, which was becoming more and more involved with graphics and, visual effects, and starting to build that world. So it just sucked me in. As soon as I saw it, as soon as I knew it existed, that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a common thread in these stories. Like, I had no idea that this was an actual career, and then I think once you enter that orbit, you're on it. Now, since you were the first person to share, you have the mic. You get to decide who goes next.
Should we stay in order, Jessica?
Sure. I'm Jessica. I was the visual effects producer on Peacemaker, and I actually joined the show right after filming started, and so Betsy was already responsible for setting up the show and doing so much, getting James organized and getting Proof onto the show, and my responsibility was being a partner to Betsy on the show and to make sure we got what we needed, and also to be a liaison to Proof to help direct our priorities and schedule and make sure we stayed on budget with the work. And we all just made a really nice team to put the show together.
Awesome. And can you, share with us just one of maybe your early inspirations when?
Oh, sure. I can pin it. It was when I saw the Disney Lion King in the movie theater in, what was that, 1993 or something. And I thought, I'm going to make movies. And I didn't really know how that was going to work out. And then I went to college and I realized I couldn't be an artist. And it just sort of was one of those things that as soon as I learned production was a path, it made a lot of sense for me because I get to be around creative people all the time, which is the initial draw to movie making. But I also get to talk to people this way and sort of make connections with people all over the world, and then still be a part of creating something that's really exciting and connecting with people that way. So it's been a dream.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so you are the deciding factor. You get to pick our next person to share.
All right, Jordan can go.
Hello. I was the visualization supervisor on this and oversaw a team of Pre-Vis and Postvis artists going through that whole process of kind of doing animated storyboards and some temp visual effects. And yeah, we had a blast. It was a really fun show to work on.
And what do you draw inspiration from?
God, so like the first thing I can remember where like it hit me that this was a thing was watching Toy Story in the theater, like the first Toy Story, and that was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I don't think it actually hit me that this was a thing you could do until I was taking like a CAD class in high school and we started playing with some 3D software, and I was like, oh my God, so this is how they do that. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'll try that. And so, kind of put myself on a path towards this kind of work, and ended up, I mean, I think I was on the path of being like an animator, like thought I'd be an animator at Pixar or something, but then realized that I'm okay at animation, but it's like, that's really hard to get that last 10% to make it like amazing. And when we graduated college, getting connected with Proof and saying, oh my God, so there's stuff we can do that like doesn't have to be fully finished, polished stuff, but it's still filmmaking and really fun, and you get to kind of have a lot of fun with it and do lots of different things and wear different hats. But yeah, that was a late realization. I didn't know that was a job that existed until we got there, and so it's been really great.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I get to talk to a lot of students who are kind of at the beginning, like they're aspiring towards this stuff, and I think that a misconception is this idea of scarcity. Like there's not enough positions to go around, and it's only these few things. But this idea of like actually production has so many open doors, and a place for everybody to find their niche. Yeah, very cool. For sure. All right, so Ranko, it's down to you.
Okay. Well, I was the Previs Postvis lead on the show, and I was working with Jordan. We were basically working with a team to kind of get everything worked out. Yeah, in terms of how I got into like inspiration and everything else, I mean, I loved watching cartoons when I was little, and but I mean, I knew that cartoons are hand drawn. You kind of you can do it at home. It's nice, but then I think it's kind of Toy Story Jurassic Park time that it started clicking that there's a whole other side of this too. I mean, like once you kind of connect with the animation with live action and everything else, it started clicking that there's also another side of this. So I ended up in the LA area, and I figured let's try this. Let's see if this works out as a career path. And I've known Jordan for a long time. We ended up at Proof together, and it was interesting because I was also I started off kind of before college aiming towards like modeling, maybe like industrial design, did a little bit of architectural stuff, and but animation just seemed to draw me in a lot more. And the thing is, kind of when you're in school, you don't really know the kind of the, like you were saying, the breadth of the whole industry. And I knew okay, modeling, animation, or something. So but once I found out about Previs, which kind of fell into it, really. I mean, we didn't know a ton. And once you're going out of school, like especially back in whatever that was, 2007-ish, there wasn't too much known about the field. So we kind of fell in, and that's the wonderful thing is you basically get to work with a whole host of people just to kind of, you get to touch a little bit of everything. And it's been really like a great learning experience, I think. Editorial and everything else, you pick up on everything. So yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the common thread here between all of you guys, because it reminds me of something that comes up all the time at Nounnan. And that is, students will ask instructors, they'll ask, our founder, Alex Alvarez, well, what should I learn? What's the thing that everybody's hiring for that I should go learn that's going to get me the job? And the answer is always, well, what are you passionate about? And I love how for each of you, like, you had this passion that in some cases you didn't even know what job that passion connected to, but you stayed with your passion and it led you to the right place. And I think that's so true, so important. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm really excited about, and I won't give it away. I'll let the clip that you guys are going to share set it up. But this is probably my favorite character, and so I've heard many other people's favorite character on this show. But did you guys want to say anything about this before we roll the next clip?
Kind of speaks for himself.
Right,
let's go for it. Yeah.
Go for it.
I love Eagly. So much expression, and it's not like a beak can smile, but somehow, like, there's so many different looks that Eagly has. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that was sort of our biggest concern going into it, is will we be able to sell emotion and character from this creature that James was very, very adamant this is a real eagle. This is not some superpowered being. It's not Rocket Raccoon.
Right.
But at the same time, it's very clearly a pet, and loves Peacemaker and wants to get involved, and he's part of the team. And it's really amazing how much expression you can get out of just body movement and that beak. And I think we only adjusted his eyes once or twice to do a little expression there. It mostly comes from just the body language.
Yeah, because the eagles don't really, I mean, they've got this very distinct face, and it's not like the eyebrows are raising and going down a lot.
I mean, I did a lot of research, and we could have gone further. I mean, they do have a little bit of motion there. Like you can see there's pictures of wounded eagles and stuff, and they look very wide-eyed. And when they're attacking, they're a little bit more frowny. But we wanted to stay away from that, because we really didn't want to. We didn't want him to feel unreal, except in sometimes he does things that maybe a real eagle wouldn't do, but maybe they would.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, it was just the right blend. As we were talking before the stream started, I think the first time I saw Eagly in the intro to the show, I thought, how did they train an eagle to like fly in the middle of this dance and like land and spread its wings? And that's amazing. But yeah, it's like this perfect blend of, it's 100% a believable eagle, but then you see this eagle doing things that you're like, this bird is really smart, like really knows what's going on. So could you tell us a little bit more about, the inception of this character, the way you guys are directed by James Gunn, and, as you said about the expression, like some of the challenges that you guys had to take on?
Well, I mean, Proof was really the first vendor that had to worry about it. They were really instrumental in helping us kind of find that line and find that character. And really the Pre-Vis and the Postvis became the first animation pass. And we were able to hand that to Weta and they could add all of the polish and the bells and whistles and tweak it just so. But it was really all a foundation from the visualization.
In that, was that one of those times where the Pre-Vis really does have to exude the acting that there was. I'm hearing you say there was nuance in the Pre-Vis that had to be there to be able to get this character across. Okay.
I think it really helped develop what Eagly ended up being in terms of, as a character, because I'm not sure we knew he would be so charming. Maybe Betsy, you always knew.
I knew. I knew.
But it was so great seeing him in the shots. Yeah, James did have a plan, to be fair, from the beginning of what this character was going to be. But even, how he was going to interact with Peacemaker and stuff, that was proof in Betsy planning that first pass that got everybody sold on the idea really early on.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. Just our rig, we were moving pretty quickly at the beginning, and so our rig was actually somewhat limited. We didn't have we didn't build in any you couldn't move it open his eyes or close them. His beak is a solid beak, so we really had to kind of lean on his posing and a little head tilts, or he'd do a little talking, stuff like that, and just kind of play with that and try to get any kind of emotion out of him. But it was really effective when just even just a little head tilt is it says so much. And the way he'll sidle up against Peacemaker, different things. So we had fun with that and doing little tests of figuring out how does he supposed to walk and different things. But yeah, it was a blast. It was a blast.
Well, to your point, I'm curious because Eagly comes across as a character that was in camera with these guys. I mean, just another cast member, and all the nuances you talked about feels like this is a directed actor that's being directed into nuance and those kind of things. How did that direction take place as you guys were developing this character? Because obviously, Eagly wasn't fully formed in camera with the actors, and yet it feels like James is just off camera going, now do this, Eagly, now turn your head that way. How did you guys do that?
It's a lot of talking on set about what he needs to do, and we have some really primitive. I think in one of the things that we're going to screen share, there's a picture of the model we had on set. That
you can get that up now.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, these are some of the that's the model, and look how nice and clean and pretty he is, and you'll see it later after he's been on set for a few months. He didn't, we put him through a lot. But we brought him out and for every shot so that, all the actors kind of knew where he was and what he was going to be doing. But then, we would pull him out and there would just be a stick or nothing really. So it was down to John Cena to really emote. And then we kind of would match Eagly to him. We played off of him more than anything. And that's really where the Postvis is important because once you have the plates, then you kind of work with them and find the performance that really sells the acting that John is doing.
That's it. John, his acting made it really easy to play off of. It was a lot of fun to just animate Eagly, causing a reaction that John Cena's performing, and so it just it made it really easy.
Well, and there was total chemistry. I think that's one of the things that's so fun about this character is so you're saying that chemistry happened. You've got the idea across of what's happening in the scene, but then John Cena is acting this out, and you're playing off of John Cena's acting in the animation. And it's amazing how that can happen and then feel like it's happening right there in the moment in camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's my favorite part of the job, really.
And I think we should mention, I mean, obviously James has an idea in his head as to what he wants, and it does clearly, communicate what he wants. So, our job is to kind of take that. I mean, we looked at a bunch of, reference from Real Eagles, what they do and stuff, and there's a lot of these actions where you're not going to find reference. I mean, there's just eagles don't really attack people much. You know, they don't. There's a lot of things that they don't do. So so we had to kind of figure out what's a believable, a believable action, a believable way to communicate the stuff. I mean, we started with start with realistic and then go towards kind of emoting more, because I figured if you go the other way, it's not going to work out very well. You're going to end up with a cartoon basically. So yeah, I mean, we had a lot of fun just kind of trying to figure that out, and especially with I mean, the limited rig we were saying before, that really helps you, because you basically are just kind of posing a puppet, right? I mean, you don't have too much to play with there. So you communicate the stuff across. We put it into Previs, people could actually kind of read what's going on. And then by the time, it was shot, and once you start seeing the acting with it, then you can kind of go off of that. But I do feel like there was kind of a 3-step process, where
if it's working at all with the stuff we're doing, then it's only going to get that much better once it's like actually finished. So it's off to a good start when the stuff is reading when we're doing it, because it's relatively primitive. But
yeah,
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, even from the standpoint of traditional painting, it's like it's gotta work at the thumbnail level.
Exactly.
If it doesn't work there, it's not going to come together.
Right.
You, Ranko, you're talking about, some actions for Eagles you have reference for, others you don't. I remember watching the series, and for me anyway, that the first moment where it felt like this went from being, a guy and an animal to like something else was the first hug that happened. And it was weird because it felt very real, but it was like, do eagles hug? Like, does this happen in nature? Have reference for this, or like, how did you do that?
James swears that he saw something on YouTube somewhere, but we could never quite find it. So
Awesome.
he is very sure that he did see it somewhere, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, I know I looked. You guys probably looked as well.
For sure. Yeah, you end up just kind of like, let's just go for it and see what happens.
Well, it was it was magic. It was amazing. It was, I think, the difference between, I think, other really amazing, lovable CG characters that have that chemistry on screen. I know you made comparisons like to Rocket and other things like that. Was what you said. This is not an exaggeration of a real animal, but yet the animal has to have character. And I think that this was, for me anyway, it was one of the first times that I saw that really happening at that level. And it was just so cool to, because it took any disbelief that I could have had, because I was assuming, I know this is a CG character. I completely forgot that it was CG. Eagly's real now. Eagly lives somewhere in LA and is waiting for his next show. But yeah, it was amazing. I think you guys, we've got another clip having to do with some of the early research and development for Eagly. Is that right? Or did we already show that?
We showed that. I mean, we have some Previs also if we wanted to show that.
Sure.
Okay, so just a little bit of a little sampler of just kind of one of the scenes that we prevised that features Eagly. Yeah, you take some of the animation studies that you do and then start applying it and just see how it actually works in context. And we did go through a few variations there, different options for, how much do you push it? How far do you go with the emoting, the head tilts and stuff? I mean, obviously you can go too far, but it was pretty. I mean, got to give credit to the team. Everyone doing animation was really enjoying it. So, it does come across, even in Previs, it's the animation was a little bit on the rough side, but you can definitely start seeing the emotion and kind of you get the look and everything else. And then once we got into Postvis, people really got to have more fun with it. So
yeah. And it had, that scene in particular had to change a bit when we got into Postvis too, because where we actually shot, there was this giant log that James decided Eagly would be sitting on, which
right.
meant that the helmet didn't have anywhere to go. So we ended up playing with it falling off, and then that becomes, you know, the thing that happens there.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask about were there ways that, because you know with these kinds of creative processes, it's you don't fully know how something is going to be realized. Were there ways that Eagly evolved that you didn't anticipate as you took on this character and developed this character?
I think we pushed it farther than I thought we would a couple times. With the, you know, everyone loves him sticking his head out the car. That was a real surprise to me when we went that far.
Yeah.
And him dancing in the truck.
Yeah.
But people love those shots so much, and they I mean, they ended up being so fun. But it was funny from, you know, the very beginning, going from like maybe James wanting a practical eagle even to you know, an eagle dance into the was a bit of an evolution, I think.
Yeah.
I do remember early on holding things back, and like we were just kind of playing it more realistic, and he was just kind of head out the window like a dog, more or less. But it was really fun seeing like that, like in particular, and ending up like the tongue was fantastic.
Yeah. When I came up with that and sent it to us, and I really thought James was going to say, "Oh no, that's too much."
Yeah.
He loved it. He really loved it. Yeah.
I think that's probably when you know you've really got something, is like when you can take the director's idea and love it so much that you kind of expound upon it, and maybe even unintentionally, but kind of like you geek out on their idea and you hand it back to them and they're like, this is amazing. That's for me anyway, that's where the magic is, because you've got something that you wouldn't have had if these people weren't working together.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. I think what I mean, especially, you know, rocking out in a car, basically this kind of the magic of, you know, basically the bigger team working together, right? I mean, once you start seeing it in the edit, and you start seeing, you know, you see John Cena doing his thing, and you got the music going and everything else, it just makes sense. And, you know, in Previs, maybe if just wouldn't have made sense, you know, maybe it seemed like it was too much, but you know, once you start seeing it in context, it just works.
Yeah.
He was very much a part of that team, and I think we all knew he'd be the star of the show. So
yeah, I think that was what was so cool, is you guys gave us just enough. Like you talk about pushing a little bit further than you thought you would, but you selectively chose those moments and then didn't take it too far. And I think it was sort of like not playing the hand fully that anyway made the character so endearing to me, because it was like you're anticipating, like, is Eagly going to dance too? Is this going to happen? Yeah, all right, you know. And you kind of you gave me what I wanted, but then you didn't give so much of it that I was like, okay, now it's old. You know,
right.
it was just perfect, just beautiful.
I think that adds to the suspense at the end with the dropping the helmet, because you really don't know if he's going to do it. You're like, well, maybe he is smart enough to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I feel like Eagly needs his own origin story. Like he needs his own, like, you know,
a prequel
star of the show.
Absolutely.
For real.
Yeah.
And I think the other really cool thing that I just want to nerd out on really quick that I loved about this character is Eagly kind of became, at least to me, not only Eagly's character development and not just the development of Peacemaker, but because you really put him in as part of the team, he seemed to have a lot to do with every team member's development, because there was those dynamics of like, is Eagly going to accept this person right away, or is he going to be skeptical? And when do they bond, and in what circumstances are they bonding, and all of that stuff.
Yeah. James is very good at that kind of inter-team dynamics. That's kind of his thing, definitely.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we took a look at the Eagly Pre-Vis, and I'm just kind of reviewing some of my questions, the things that I knew that I wanted to ask. Oh yeah. Can we talk about, some of the kind of usual limitations that productions face? Budget and all the different kinds of constraints that you normally have to kind of work inside when you're creating something like this. Um, you know, how did you navigate what you could or couldn't do, or maybe that gave rise to some creative decisions you didn't know you were going to make, as you might have had to face some of the budgetary limitations or time constraints and those kind of things?
I think we were really lucky on this show because James had a really clear vision for what the show was going to be, and I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is, a lot of stuff is figured out sort of as we go, which is a total normal way of working and really exciting and fun problem solving. But this show always had a path, I think, and that was made it a bit unique and special, I think.
You mean to say that like you kind of knew the intention, you knew the path that was going to be taken kind of from the onset?
Yeah, from start to finish, I think this show is exactly what it was intended to be. And I think that's a special thing and a unique thing, and that we were lucky to sort of have that experience. And not to say that other shows, that's a fault of other shows. It's just a different process, and it meant that we got to put all of our time and energy into focusing on making it what it was supposed to be, instead of having to pivot and find solutions to things. It was all sort of lined out really nicely and planned really well, which was really nice.
And in tandem with that, I'm gonna kind of go off script just a little bit here, because this just came to mind. We've got all these different groundbreaking moments in visual effects and animation. I mean, you guys talked about it with first time seeing Toy Story and that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of times when we have a really memorable character or some really memorable moments that happen on screen with CG characters, often along with those come some things that maybe you guys developed a way of doing things that you didn't have before, because you had to solve some of these challenges, or in getting this character to be who he really needed to be. Did you guys find, were there some new superpowers you guys developed, or maybe even some takeaways that you're like, oh yeah, my next project, I'm going to totally go in with this mindset or this thing that I learned?
For us, it was, I feel, and I could be like wrong, but it was pretty straightforward. I feel like our stuff was, we rigged up the characters and we animated them. Like, nothing is coming to mind that was crazy, but I don't know if I'm not thinking of something.
I mean, I think Weta pushed their feather technology a little bit, but that's
cool.
Probably something they needed to do anyway.
Sure.
But it things like that can be very difficult. Doing really realistic feathers that kind of you just accept as feathers and don't feel like a painted texture that's wrapped around the model. So it's certainly been done before, but I think they were able to develop a pipeline that let us do it kind of at speed, which was what we needed on this show.
And do you find that speed, what I hear often in production, especially for a series and for many of the stream content coming out, that speed is what's necessary for a show as opposed to a feature film? I
mean, the expectation is the same. The level of quality expectation is exactly the same, especially with someone like James Gunn leading the show, because it was his first TV series. So he wanted to do the same stuff that he does on the features. He knew he would be able to do less of it, but he wanted it needed to look good. And I think that's sort of the biggest advance generally in technology over the last few years, and why you're seeing so many of these big streaming shows now, is that it finally is possible to build these pipelines that can work at a faster speed. You still we have to do our parts. We have to plan meticulously, and honestly, the visualization, the Pre-Vis and the Postvis is a huge part of that, because the one thing series can't afford to do that features can is change your mind. You know,
Right.
it's got to be what you planned it to be. So you really need to put a lot of effort into figuring out what that plan is, so that you're not, you know, taking a left turn in the middle of post production because there's just no time.
Yeah, and it takes us back to the point that was made earlier about the vision for this character being very clear from the onset.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, if it were me, I'd be thinking, look at all this cool stuff we could do with this eagle, and I just want to play around with it all the time, you know. But you don't have the time for that.
No.
Yeah. I think
Awesome.
with episodic stuff, and we were talking about what, like 4 movies basically in one, you know, in terms of content. So you can't really afford to be, you know, just rethinking everything 5 months later, basically. So and I mean, I think we're making it sound very kind of understated here, but the magic of the show was just, it was so straightforward in a wonderful way. Like, people, they knew what they wanted to do. You know, we got, James clearly said what he wanted, and we just kind of went with it. And I think it gave us more time to do, you know, to enjoy the work,
to make it good.
You know, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and I think it feels that way across the show as well. Like, I wouldn't have been able to say it until you articulated it, but it's such a clear read. Everything is, all of the characters, the design, the costumes, everything about the show comes across very clear. You know exactly what's going on, and how you need to interface with it as a viewer. Yeah, it definitely felt for me like this was the first time that I saw a CG character of this type on a show, and I was totally surprised. I wasn't ready for that bar of quality, because I think we have different expectations still for episodic shows than we do for feature. But this was like, again, I thought it was a real eagle at first, until I realized, oh yeah, eagles probably don't stick their heads out the window and bop to the music on cue.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
but
can
it
we
would
get
be
in
physically possible. It would be physically possible for him to do.
Very, very good point. And I think you just showed us kind of, that was an important guideline in that sense.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
From a story standpoint, from an interaction with the environment standpoint, we wouldn't expect an eagle to do it, but the eagle wasn't, you know, breaking its own skeleton to perform those actions.
Yes,
it was
exactly.
staying believable as that creature. That's a great point. Yeah. So could we talk a little bit about Postvis for this character?
Sure. Got a little bit of a clip that we can play just while we're talking. Let this go. So, yeah, I mean, Betsy, feel free to kind of go with this.
I mean, you know, what the purpose of Postvis for us is to, as quickly as possible, get the CG creatures and the effects in there, so that everybody knows what's going on, and that affects the edit. Oh, so this is what happened on set with the model, and you can kind of see how ratty he got by this. I think this was episode 7, so that poor thing had been around a lot. But yeah, the Postvis is really where we can, once we see this stuff, we can refine the edit and make sure that it's really flowing in a way that, you know, we can't wait until we turn the shots over to the final vendor to do. So there's a lot of back and forth during that period. Like, oh, you know, maybe a different take would look better, or maybe, you know, maybe we need to tighten this up here, or maybe we need to give Eagly more time to get from here to there. So that's really what we're learning in the Postvis.
What kind of reactions? Or I was just going to ask, what kind of reactions were you getting, especially the first time you started handing some of this off to your vendor? Were these people just like, this is amazing, or were they getting into they were obviously had to have been finding the humor in the character? And
oh, they were very much into it, and certainly James was blown away the first time I showed him the first scene we Postvised on set. I'm trying to remember what scene it was. But
Yeah,
I'll take my iPad over to him when Proof sends stuff and show him like, hey, look what we got.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was blown away. He's like, oh, phew, this is gonna work. Okay.
That's awesome. And that probably felt really good for you guys too.
Yeah.
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 For us, it's fun. Pre-Vis generally, it's gotten a lot better in the like last few years, but it's a bit rudimentary. It looks like a video game. But when we transition to Postvis, it's a lot of fun because we get to now let's up the textures and up the lighting and get into comping and make it look good. So we have a lot of fun just kind of taking it to the next level and seeing how close we can get it to looking as final as we can in our we do stuff really quickly and it's like high turnaround and we got to iterate and everything, but we do have a lot of fun making it look cool.
Yeah.
Were there other moments aside from, I think you guys talked about the moment with the head bob and things, were other moments in maybe some of the post-viz where you guys surprised yourselves with this character? Like you were like, oh wow, this is great.
Trying to think of some specifics. I mean, one of the nice things is when you do the hug, I mean, that's definitely one of those moments where once you start seeing the footage, you start seeing, the actors doing their thing and everything else. I don't know. To me, it's always like rediscovering this stuff, even if you've previs this stuff before, if you're really familiar with it, you've read the lines in the script and whatever. Once you actually start seeing it, that's when you really start seeing the thing come together. So to me, that's always a fun part is, when it starts becoming real,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it. I mean, there's some parts that are kind of similar to others, but a lot of it was just kind of once you start getting into it and you start, I mean, look, the eagle swooping and attacking people, you do it with in Previs and it's kind of, okay, it's a little dummy there, but once you have the person flailing around or something, then it starts to look really savage. you start wondering, like, maybe you push it too far, or maybe you pull back on it. So,
Okay.
but, yeah, no, I mean, it's always fun to kind of go from one stage to the next, and like Jordan was saying, we get more toys when we start upgrading.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that type of a scene, particularly where there's like really dynamic interaction happening between the actual actor on set and this character, were there times that the physical performance of the actor or actors in camera changed or influenced the way that you were approaching Eagly in that scene?
I mean, let's see. There's always, I mean, one thing that's always important is eye line. You got to make sure that you can connect. The CG character, and some of this stuff is very subtle, but you got to make sure that you get it right. So I think for us, once you kind of start by just getting the mechanics of everything working, and then you start kind of bouncing off of it. And there's all the subtle things that that we humans do that you probably wouldn't notice until you start recording it and looking at it.
Sure.
And like all the little, micro expressions and whatever else that animators try to get in. And I mean, you can, once you start looking at what the actor is doing, you start picking it up also. So yeah, it was, it's the minute details, but it does help,
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Sometimes
totally
it's
makes
even
sense.
the way they're filming on set and there's no eagle there, and so we know like the camera's got to pan to follow Eagly, but they're not filming anything, and so sometimes it's like we have to figure out the pan is maybe a little bit too slow, and so now the eagle is flying like really slow, and so we're figuring out, okay, well, what if we try to speed it up here, or, figuring things out like that to get the shot to work better. Those kinds of things happen often.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned early on in the stream, finding this balance between this is not supposed to look like a cartoon character. It's not supposed to behave like a cartoon character. And yet it's a very emotive, very important character that's toe to toe with everyone else on screen. Can you tell us a little bit more about finding that balance between, emotive, realistic, and cartoon?
Who goes first?
I feel like that's a Jordan or Betsy answer.
I mean, it's something you sort of find. You have to just keep trying it, and I do feel like we found it fairly quickly on this one, especially once we saw the actors, like as you're saying, really performing, and you start to get a feel for the tone and the level of the show. It's really just about making sure Eagly fits in there, the right way, has the same level of energy, or is playing off them with more or less energy in a way that makes sense for the scene. It's I thought it would be harder than it actually was. It kind of fell into place fairly quickly.
I would agree. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
We kind of just started playing, and it just kind of worked. It felt good, and it didn't take. If I remember correctly, it didn't take a whole lot of like back and forth to get Eagly to feel right.
No. I think one of the first scenes that we Postvis was the hug in the garage, and I mean that's not a mechanical one, right? You're just diving straight into making sure that it's because he doesn't do much, right? I mean, you basically need an excited eagle who then goes and basically hugs, right? So it was definitely a little bit of, I mean, you don't get it on your first try, that's for sure. But it actually did seem to, like, once we started playing with the timing and everything else, it did fall into place pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Eagly was meant to be.
Yep.
He really was.
There's a bit of back and forth, wasn't there, on some squawks, maybe at some point, where we had to change animation to match audio a few times to get his squawking quite right, which was
true.
Yeah, there was at first there was sort of constant squawking, and then I kind of realized that was a bit much, so they had to bring it back and make it a little bit more intentional. So we did have to reanimate to that.
Yeah, it certainly made Eagly feel like Eagly had something to say. Like, that it's like that person who's quiet and they don't open their mouth until they really have something to talk about. That's the way Eagly felt to me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to understand what he was saying. That would I would have loved to have like subtitles or but John Cena helped us out with that for sure.
Yeah.
Anything more we want to unpack along the lines of going from now post directly into finals? What was that transition like, getting to your final shots from post?
It was pretty good. I mean, we were able to kind of hand Weta, the animators at Weta, this great Postvis, and it was, it really saved time in that they already had their blocking pass. They knew what he was supposed to be doing, and honestly, the only times we had to kind of pull Weta around were when they, I feel a little bad for some of the animators there, because they would have an idea of like, oh, what if he did this? And it would be a great idea, but James was like, nope, we've already decided this. He's going to do this. That's what we did in the Postvis. So there were a couple of cases of pulling it back. But Weta was amazing. They added sort of another layer on top of all the tiny, the micro movements and the finesse and really just plus the realism of the renders and the comps.
Yeah, and the Postvis really helped, like Betsy said, solidify the edit. So what that meant for us was that once shots were turned over to Weta, that there weren't many editorial changes past that. So it was a pretty linear schedule. There weren't a lot of stop-starts in terms of shot work, which really helped us deliver the show without too many problems.
Yeah, it seems like all of that is a testament back to what you said earlier. Is it really from the beginning, you guys knew what you wanted. James Gunn knew
Yeah.
what he wanted out of this character, so there was a very, very clear direction to be followed.
Yeah, and the Postvis also got other people excited. You know, they got HBO excited because they didn't have to imagine what the show was going to look like with Eagly. They got to see a version of it. And so it was really easy for everybody involved in the show from a high level to be excited about the show. Everyone knew it was going to be successful, you know, way before it was delivered because they'd seen these edits with, you know, all of the shots in some form sort of slated in. So
Yeah, I gotta imagine that I try to put myself in the position of a producer or an executive who's like, the eagle's gonna do what? And then you see this eagle hug and you're like, this is amazing. Like, you know, you've got
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Let's see. I think, and let me know if I'm jumping too far ahead, if there's more to cover before this. But I think our next clip, we're going to be talking about the butterflies of the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
Come on, pretty monster, give me.
So those
going
are
from, like-
our aliens.
Yeah, but like we all know what an eagle is, and that's super, super grounded. And now we're going to something totally alien, totally fantastical. I'm excited to hear you guys talk about the development of these, but also like what seems to me to be totally the other end of the scale, right? Like something that we've never seen before. How did you bring that in and make that work in this really grounded environment you created for yourselves?
I mean, that, you know, that's kind of always James Gunn's trick, is to have these unreal things, but in such a grounded way that you believe it and you believe people's reactions to it. So for the butterfly, you know, it was written in the script as just some kind of beautiful alien looking butterfly. There wasn't really too much description other than that. So we started by doing a lot of research on various insects and birds and bugs and all kinds of stuff to try to put in front of James and say, you know, is there anything here? What if we took a bit of this and a bit of that? And what everyone responded to the most was this, I think it's called a flower mantis. It's this kind of gorgeous bug that has all these colors and wings and really mantis-like movements. So we knew that would have a good face of some sort that we could make really alien looking and have limbs that it could do things with, and you could believe that it was an intelligent creature. You know, they flock, but they're very intelligent, clearly. So we kind of needed to sell that even in this tiny little bug form.
And
so
the last thing that I want flying into my mouth. Like,
yeah,
they're really
exactly.
cool looking, but the present danger that I think they represented became very felt when it was like, I don't want that in me.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that gets sold very much with, you know, Song getting hit behind the trailer.
Oh, yeah.
You know, she
It's
did
so
a fantastic job.
Mhm.
But that was meant to be, you know, where you see like these things are killing people when they dive into their mouths. It's not fun.
Yeah.
But they also, you know, there were a lot of technical challenges because there needed to be hundreds of them, swarms,
Mhm.
which is always a big deal to do in animation and rendering, especially. So, you know, I'm sure you guys have some thoughts about what it was like to previs those scenes
Yeah, absolutely.
or Postvis.
Yeah, we had to come up with, like, you know, with the limited time and everything, it's pretty quick. So we had to come up with some like dynamic simulations to figure out how they swarm and what that all looks like. And then in order to like kind of move quickly, baking that down into something that can just be used over and over and over. So we did lots of that. And in terms of like the butterfly, just what's great about the butterfly is that, like you said, we have, you know, there's no reference necessarily for like how this is an alien creature, how it moves. You know, I have an idea of like flying, you know, kind of how a butterfly might fly and flutter and stuff. But other than that, the way they walk and move, you can get away with a lot. And so I think we had a lot of fun animating, just because, you know, when a human moves, you know when something's wrong. You can tell right away that, oh, that doesn't look right. But these little guys, you start moving them around, you have some fun, you play with the animation, and you're like, oh, that actually looks pretty cool, because it's just, we've never seen it before. So like, he was actually, it was really fun to animate him like coming up, coming out of the guy's head and different things like that. And those were actually, we had a lot of fun with those.
And then the death scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There was also just practically shooting. There's a scene where a butterfly is pulled out of someone's mouth, and Betsy had the, you know, really smart idea about creating something for the actors to interact with on set. That way we could have that resistance in plate. Coming out of was Harcourt's mouth. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
I mean, anytime you have something CG really interacting with the actor, and you know, and something that's physically got to pull them, you really need some sort of physical prop to help them, because you're not gonna, if they just mime it, you're not gonna get the same kind of presence and motion.
Yeah, a person can't move their mouth that way on their own. They need that, like as you said, the resistance. Reminds me in some of the really early days when you know, you kind of broke the wall of reality, because we just didn't have that kind of interaction in camera. Whether someone was reaching out to pet something. So it seems like a lot of really innovative ways have been come up with over the years to figure out how to get that in shot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's always different. You come up with stuff. The visual effects truck always has a kit of just random, you know, pipe cleaners and dowels and tons of tennis balls, and you know, because we know stuff like that is going to come up, sandbags, and we just anything to help the actors really have something physical to work with. It just helps immeasurably.
Yeah.
We did a 3D print of the butterfly as well, so they could see, you know, what it looked like and get a sense for how creepy it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then there was also the butterfly that was, you know, in the jar with Peacemaker, and that I don't know. To me, that felt like the audience needed to bond with this species just a little bit and understand their motives, so that they carried some weight in the story. Was there anything specific in terms of direction that you received from the director, or how did you find that uniqueness of that side of quote unquote the enemy or the antagonist in the series?
I mean, we had some back and forth about the size of the jar, definitely, because I think originally it was a much smaller jar. And James realized that, you know, he didn't want it to look like Peacemaker was torturing the butterfly. So we found a much bigger jar that he could be kept in. And then, it was just really having fun with it. You know, all sorts of fun things happen with the Peacemaker dancing scene and blowing smoke into his bottle.
Yes. And there were so many moments with the butterflies where I was like, oh, it went from like I'm creeped out to like now I'm really creeped out. Like, it's like you guys just pushed it past what I was expecting it to go in some places.
Yeah. Danielle falling out of the Catcow. The big gross out moment for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the butterfly was interesting. Some of the animation I know that we tried, it was hard to see just because of the scale. So when they're, you know, when the butterfly's tapping on the jar, having a conversation kind of, I know we tried a couple sort of gags in there and they didn't play as well as maybe we would have liked. I think he plugged his ears at one point when the phone rang.
Yeah. It's stuff for people who watch it for like the third time.
Then maybe they'll see.
Yeah. But the butterflies is doing stuff, even though you're not really paying attention to it.
Yeah,
it's long frame.
That's what's so fun about it being a series, and you know, being out there, and then of course the internet is that, you know, if you've got those layers, people will find them. They will find them and talk about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think we have a second clip, or did we already show that for the butterflies, going from post to finals?
We do have a clip, yes.
Okay, great.
So we just have basically a few things here, just kind of a couple little sections just to show people what, you know, I mean, basically we're trying to get the storytelling across, and you'll see the changes that, you know, from post-vis into final and everything else. There's a lot of work that goes in between the two stages, but, you know, we have our fun. We kind of get to play with the stuff first, and then kind of hand it off to basically to the final vendor to have their fun with it. So here's the finals for that.
So yeah, it's pretty similar. They're you know, we've had a lot of back and forth over how exactly they're flying in, and then we had a few screen direction issues through here, just because it's a little confusing since she's looking down at a hill, and the camera's kind of crossing behind her. But it worked out pretty well.
This is our temp solution to swarms, right? We the low fidelity version, but, you know, I mean,
It worked.
basically, yeah, we're here to tell the story, right? So
Yeah.
Yep. And then yeah, James just wanted more butterflies.
mhm.
And you know, there was a lot of back and forth with the actors because, you know, there's all these extras trying to do this thing, and they really didn't have a lot of experience with CG characters, and there wasn't much we could do for them. We just had to make sure they had their mouths open at the right time.
Well, it
Definitely
worked.
playing, you know, hands going like this, and okay, where does we got to get the wing in there?
Yeah,
Have
I
given
know,
something to hold
I
on to. Yeah, made it work.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
while
glad
we were
that you
shooting,
guys.
there were
sorry,
there
go
were
ahead.
just a few that like would fall down without ever opening their mouths, and we'd have to say, no, you've got to let the butterfly in before you fall down.
Or was that how the how should we say, alternative points of entry was thought of to solve that problem? that was
yeah,
really funny.
we didn't quite go down that road with that
Yeah.
scene, but,
No, it was just sort of proposed, and then I was like,
Yes.
"Oh God, please no."
The
You know,
mouth
I
is
was
really
going to say, I'm
the
really
easiest way
glad
to
that
do it.
you guys
Yeah.
pushed that swarm as far as you did, because that scene, I'm not a bug guy, and I don't like things that are going to flutter around me and maybe land on my face. So this was just like the worst of the worst in that moment, because there were too many that you could ever deal with all of them.
I do love how that, especially in that episode and that whole sequence, and it starts out when we're like, especially that side shot with Song walking and the swarm behind her, like they're kind of beautiful, and but at the same time, you know, this is such a foreboding moment, and you're just this tension. You know what's about to happen, that something bad's about to happen, but there's that contrast of these beautiful creatures from far away, and then coming into just terrible slaughter.
Mayhem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's that sort of terrible thing that you can't look away from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Let's see here. I'm just continuing through here. Okay. So I think unless you guys had any more you wanted to unpack with the butterflies, we can move forward to our the beloved Catcow.
Sure.
I guess we can just kind of touch on the
such a
Also,
such a
another
crazy
very
creature.
creepy thing to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
mean,
Ranko, you were saying just as we were setting up that clip before it rolled.
Oh no, just I guess on the topic of basically post-visiting the butterflies. One of the issues that we run into is just, we work quickly. So, working with these things that have to fill up space, we don't have the luxury of, weeks or whatever it is to set up a shot. So there's a lot of back and forth that happens with animators, just trying to figure out, that thing is actually behind a desk, it's just, you gotta just start working within limitations. And so that was a bit of a challenge on the sequence, but we kind of got everyone we set up the rules, the butterfly has to land, and then, once the blood starts coming out, then, okay, it's already in, right? So, so yeah, it was just kind of there was a lot of back and forth with animators on that stuff, but I think ultimately people get to have fun, and especially when you're working with the footage of a guy flailing about, then you can just start having fun with it, So, but yeah, anyways, it was an interesting scene, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Now, the Catcow for me was just super weird. Like the weirdest, bizarre, creepy thing.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about how this came about?
I mean, in the script originally, it was supposed to be the size of the Empire State Building. But when we started playing with that in visualization, it became clear that just was too big. It was not going to work. So we kept kind of shrinking it down, looking at it with the scale of the people, because you want to have those shots where you're kind of coming down behind the characters and see their framing face. And if it was the size of the Empire State Building, it would have had to be so far away. Mm-hmm. So we eventually came up. I think we landed at about 300 feet. Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Which is plenty big.
It's huge.
Yeah. So it's not like this creature actually really does anything. It just needs to look. James really wanted it to look kind of pathetic. We should feel bad for it because it's obviously in pain. It's just trapped here, being milked. There's not much to the character other than pure misery, really. So we had fun designing it and really making sure that it had those giant eyes. So you feel for it immediately.
Yeah. And
that
tooth.
Oh, sorry.
That came later. The tooth, her tooth, and there was. I love that touch, and I was like, oh,
that came in post. Yeah, Weta played around with that, and yeah, it worked well.
It
was the finishing little touch. Yeah, it was the little finishing touch we needed on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of times now, you guys have gotten into talking about developing the design of, you talked about the butterflies, finding some in the design phase. Are you guys jumping straight into some of that, or is stuff being handed off to you from like a pre-production concept artist and stuff like that? How is, because I know you're moving fast. Were you guys contributing considerably to the design of what the final look of these guys would be?
We got concept. We weren't starting from scratch for sure. There was concept work that we got, and I can't remember if we got any models or if we modeled something roughly matching the concept. But
I think we were probably still designing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you guys did end up modeling the Catcow at least. We might have given you a butterfly model.
Yeah, you definitely gave us butterfly. Yeah, but I think we did model something just based off the concept work. And then playing. We had some good modelers who love to do gross things, so that worked out really well. So we played with that. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
We have some a little bit of concept and kind of just to be able to show people what we're talking about. So just kind of some early concepts, trying to figure out, what does this world look like? What is the actual, what is the look and feel of the whole thing? I mean, I think we kind of approached it in a 2-part process where first got to get the we'll just say the patheticness animation part of the creature. And then there's also the kind of the fact that it's essentially a giant set piece that doesn't exist, right? So there was also just kind of figuring how to place that. Betsy, I think you're the person to.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough problem because clearly we did not have stages that big, but we needed a lot of real people, running around on the ground. So we had to do a lot of planning to figure out, okay, only this corner of this giant space is going to be real, but we need to really meticulously plan, like, where does John Cena fall down the thing, and where does Adebayo come out, and it was quite a puzzle piece. So between me and the production design and proof, and and then even once Weta had it, we still were tweaking a few things here and there to make the space work. Just working at that scale is tough when you're trying to tie it into live action pieces.
And not only that, but the geography of the space was really unclear when we first started the sequence. So one of the things that Proof really helped us do was map out the entire environment and let us sort of plan, schematically where people were and how they got there, and what kind of areas we wanted to make and put people in. And that was really critical to get their help with that before we went to camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things, just Proof as a company, we kind of like to approach some of these things as world building a little bit, where we just we put things together in context, and it just really helps you sell the basically sell the space. At that point, people know where to look, where things are coming from. There's nothing to kind of take you out of action than people looking the wrong way and then doing this stuff. We see it in movies all the time, but
it was so important for this. And we I had it on my iPad the entire time we were shooting, and referencing it with the camera guys and James, and we just so that we could point at just this acres of blue screen and say, okay, that's going to be there, his eyes are going to be there. And without that kind of planning, it would have just been sort of chaos. People wouldn't have known where to look and what to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that, but you were there, providing direction, kind of to the imagination, that from the perspective that only you could have, from your side of the production, because they don't make tennis balls big enough for the Catcow.
No,
move them around for actors.
No. And I mean, on a feature where you had a lot more prep time, you might have had some kind of virtual camera system set up. Sure. But series kind of have to move a little quicker than that. So it was just me running around pointing at the invisible giant monster.
I love it. Awesome. Let's see here. So we've already covered some of the challenges that you guys had to face with this huge creature. Which makes sense because it needs to feel like it's part of the scene, yet it's so big. It's not like everybody can just, be interacting with it one-to-one. Can you guys tell us a little bit about, bring it, because I feel like the Catcow was so different than, everything was very different, but you've got Eagly, which is 100% grounded. And then you've got these butterflies, which are totally fantastical, but very grounded. I feel like this final huge creature at the end of the series was something that we probably had the least amount of context for in our imaginations, in our day-to-day interactions. So how did you, aside from making sure that the eye line and the cameras are pointing in the right direction, what were some other challenges that you guys faced in helping to ground this massive creature into this story and make it feel like it wasn't, something that was just added as an effect?
I feel like one of the things that we ran into is just the scale is kind of mind-boggling when it comes to like. It's one thing if you're making an all CG shot and you're flying over something huge, you just kind of work with the composition and you design the shot. But here we're talking about these little people who are on the ground looking at this thing, and also, I mean, if you kind of start looking in detail, there's a bunch of workers. They're interacting with set pieces. They're supposed to be interacting with the actual creature. So, I mean, just little things like that. You start to notice, you know, if said creature is hanging 100 feet above you, how do you get to it? You know. So I think there was a lot of back and forth that we found out just when you start putting it into context, you start seeing, oh, it's big. You know, we may want to move this here or do something else. So, yeah, I mean, I just remember a lot of those moments where we started kind of, you know, what's a wide lens? Ooh, this thing's big. Can you even, yeah, so,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again.
And then realizing there's a moment where Adebayo is supposed to fall out of him and survive the fall, so we might need to lower him to the ground a little bit more. You know, shouldn't be. If she falls out, you know, 5 stories up, it's going to do more damage.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and then we came up with, well, you know, we really don't want her to die on the way down. Right. Even 30 feet up, she could look pretty injured. So the solution was that his guts come out with her and kind of cushion her fall.
That's so gross.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. We had special effects dropping like just hundreds of gallons of like watery strawberry jello, like on our stunt person and actor. It was a lot.
Creative solutions.
I appreciate the practical stuff. That's always great.
Yeah.
The dailies were hilarious.
Yeah.
Poor girls, man.
How do you, when you say it was tough on them, were they like totally grossed out in those dailies, or were they
with just, I mean, like, you know, no matter, even though you know it's coming, it's still just
right.
Like, so some of the expressions on Danielle's face are very real.
The double was up high and
she was up high
on a bungee cord or something, and so it was like all of that happening to her in camera, and it was just really quite spectacular.
It looks so good.
All right, before we move into taking some time for some Q&A from those watching the stream, kind of the last thing I wanted to ask about is, you know, kind of pre-Vis is, you know, interacting with some of the initial storyboards, and even some of the storyboards coming to you from James Gunn. How do you go from, how are you receiving and interpreting that, and then moving into everything that you just have talked with us about?
I mean, one of the great things working. Go ahead, Betsy.
Yeah. Well, you were going to say the same thing I was probably.
Sure.
James
I guess. Yeah. I mean,
on board.
Yeah. He knows James knows exactly. He sees the whole movie in his head. He boards it out himself, and so you know, like you're getting exactly what you know. If you're matching the board, you're doing what he wants. Like, and it's probably going to go well. And so it makes it really smooth, and the process goes relatively quickly because it's clear. And you know, his boards don't show everything, but like they show the composition. You know exactly this character needs to be here, and there's a barn in the background or whatever. And so you know, there's plenty to work off of, and it's great because
He does all this, but he's not really a great artist. So it's very stick figures and little dots and stuff. But it works. You know what he's looking for.
Yeah, you learn the language real quick. And I remember because we worked with him we did Pre-Vis and Postvis on Suicide Squad right before this, and that was the first time we've seen his boards. And at first, it's like it takes a minute to figure out, okay, what is this supposed to be? But once you start to you have a little bit of back and forth, and you're like, okay, and then it just becomes like, okay, I totally understand. By the time we got on Peacemaker, we'd seen his boards before, and we knew exactly, we could just hit the ground running, and we knew what to do.
That's really cool, because in that sense, once you figure out that shorthand,
Yeah.
You are getting 100% the director's imagination.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's really cool.
It makes it a really fun, quick process.
Yeah.
It's a lot less guessing.
And there's definitely a nice bit of reward knowing that, I mean, basically James kind of draws it out, hoping to communicate the stuff, and then if you give him back what what he was imagining, I think there's definitely a bit of a nice little reward there, just because he gets to see that it works. It's like confirmation,
Yeah.
So
he gets very happy when it's working.
Awesome. That's got to be the best feeling, though, right? Like you get that full circle of like it started in his mind, and then it's come through you, and then it's back there again. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we jump into taking some of the questions that have come in from the chat, did you guys have proof Postvis revealed that you wanted to run, or is that the one that we already looked at?
I think you guys have a Postvis reel.
Okay, cool. I love that. I love the hug scene. It's so good. And then he reaches for his phone because he's got to get it. All right, so I want to jump into some of the questions that come into the chat. The first one is just along the lines of you guys talked about, obviously you didn't want to break the realism with Eagly, so you were referring to the way the eagles move and the reference that you had for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about any of the studies that you did of real animals as you were developing that character?
For us, we were just watching lots of eagle footage. Just how does an eagle walk? It's not something you think about often, but
right.
You got to look it up. And okay, so that was helpful. And yeah, it's really just kind of what are their behaviors, what are their mannerisms, how do they interact with people and trainers and different things, and getting that a feel for that, and diving in and animating and seeing if we can match any of that and get that feel. And yeah, I mean, that was basically for us.
Yeah. We definitely found some things that we had to adapt a little bit. I mean, the walking is actually a good example because the eagles usually hop. They kind of do the little, basically a little hop skip. But once you start putting it in a scene, it can actually look a little distracting. So if you have, kind of an emotional scene and you have this, hopping across the screen, it just doesn't really work. So we definitely had to take some liberties there. But yeah, I mean, looking at, you can, a lot of the stuff, you may not get direct reference for the stuff, but there was a lot of footage of eagles feeding, right, catching fish, doing other things like that. So you can start just piecing stuff together, and you just, as long as everyone's looking at the same stuff, you kind of start learning the language.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next question that I have is, they said, it's a question for Betsy and Jessica. Was it a noticeably long path to get a non-artist role lead in visual effects? And they were just commenting on how it's been traditionally such a male-dominated industry. What has it been like for you, in your paths, getting to the positions that you find yourself in now?
I don't really have anything to compare it to, so it just seems like my natural path.
Yeah.
It's not like I know any other way. But I was lucky enough to work at a company that spent a lot of time really trying to make sure that they had a diverse group working at the company, and you work your way up, you work hard, you sacrifice a lot. It is unfortunately still quite a male-dominated field, but I do feel like things are starting to change a little bit. It's hard to tell. I really did hope that by the time I'd been a supervisor for 20 years, there would be a lot more women supervisors, but slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's like I'll start a podcast about this topic, and we'll just go right into it. It is there's definitely some growth to be had, I think, and it's not necessarily an easy path, and I think it's important as a female, if you are trying to sort of climb the ranks and be a leader of a team, it's important to find your voice and to not be afraid to speak up. And it's something that Betsy's really good at. And, I think it's important to make sure that you're heard and that you understand the value in the knowledge that you have and what you have to offer. And then I think, like Betsy said, hard work and also just kindness. I find in this industry that the jobs that I get are repeat customers because they like working with me, and I like going to work, and I like my teams to like coming to work, and I think that's really important. And so building an environment that makes people want to be there is a thing that's helped me be successful.
Yeah, and for me, I work more with Nounnan with regard to the outreach recruitment end, looking for potential students for our program. And I will say that in recent years, what you guys are saying about the future of the industry, we are having an increasing influx of female artists coming into the school. And I've said it on the stream before. I'll be at portfolio reviews or at fairs and stuff like that with artists coming up wanting to present their work and talk about Nounnan. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, the female artists that come up have got their act together, compared to a lot of the guys coming up to the table. So if what I'm seeing is any indication, I think you guys are absolutely right. I would totally concur. I'm excited to see where things will be going with this next generation of artists. For those female artists who are just entering education and entering the industry, do you have any perspective or maybe even words of encouragement that you would want to share for those starting their paths in this present time?
Just keep going. I mean, it's a very rewarding business, that's for sure. It's not always the easiest, but for me anyway, it's got a combination of kind of technical and creative and social that just is very hard to find anywhere else. I think it's a really unique industry.
I would say ask questions. get smarter, and don't be afraid to put yourselves in positions that feel a little bit outside your comfort zone, because they'll push you to rise to that level.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I think the generation of artists coming up now are a bit better at this than my generation and Betsy's. But just being able to, believe that you can do more than you think you can, because you can. So just push yourself and know that you'll meet the challenge.
Yeah, thank you for that. Another question that has come in, that's a little bit more on the should I say, less familiar with the pipeline point of view. Someone's just wondering if you guys could articulate the main differences between Pre-Vis and Postvis on a project like this.
Yeah, well, Previs happens before filming, so we're taking the script and storyboards and figuring out how these sequences are going to look and work and play out before filming begins. It's more of a planning tool, and we can play with ideas and try things, without too much trouble or money spent or anything before production really gets going. And then Postvis is more of an editorial tool, I would say, where we're kind of temping in visual effects onto the plates that have been shot and giving editorial more to work with, so there's actually something to see in the plates. And so then that gets to go to like screenings and early screenings and things to see how the movie's playing out before all the final stuff has been done. But they've got something to work with. Yeah,
I mean, I think basically it came out of necessity years ago, because there would be a gap of months before you would basically shoot something, put together an edit, and then you would just see an empty shot and there's a little slug of text that says creature, and it's just really hard to screen some stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of, I think it started as Previs, but it basically just started dipping into the editorial portion of it, basically. And just, I mean, I guess for the people who are not familiar with the process, in terms of where Previs starts, we usually come in, it's going to depend on the show, but we either come into storyboards having been done. I mean, there's always some sort of script, even if it's changing. And we either work from the script or we work from storyboards, and we kind of just start piecing things together. It just depends on the job, basically. Sometimes it's working with the stunt people. Sometimes it's working with second unit director, meaning the action. They bust out the toy cars. So it's just going to vary by the job. And in this job, it was a lot of creature work. So looking at nothing, and then turning it into a creature. And so, I mean, basically, it's going to vary by the job, but yeah, basically, once you get to the shoot, we kind of change gears. Sometimes we, some of the Previs crew sticks around and goes into Postvis. Sometimes it's a more specialized crew. It comes down to the artists and what they're comfortable with and what their skills are. And yeah, we essentially go from the Previs pipeline is more like an animation pipeline, and then the Postvis is more like VFX. Finals VFX pipeline. But yeah,
we need trackers and compers and stuff that wasn't necessary at all in Previs, but now we need all that stuff. So it's more like visual effects in that way.
Yeah, and it has become more compartmentalized and a little bit more kind of specialized in the last few years. It used to be that it would just be a small group of, jack of all trade kind of, well, you learn comping and you learn tracking and stuff. And recently it's become much more, kind of streamlined. So.
And a related question to that that someone asked was, for an artist who would want to be starting a career in Previs, obviously they've already studied some form of 3D animation and so forth. What do you think that artists like that should be focusing on having in their portfolio if they want to be a good prospect for hire?
I mean, definitely like watching movies and getting a feel for how a good sequence is made. and putting together something, storytelling through shots edited together, and make a compelling sequence that tells a story that with good camera work and good composition, and it's nice to have like the good skills in making animation look good and everything, but it's important to like tell the story and to be able to work with a camera and know why to choose a certain lens over another and how to compose a shot. Like that stuff is really important, and being able to just put stuff together and being able to do it quickly is another big thing for us. Like we move really fast, so quick and dirty is kind of the key. But being able to put together a compelling sequence is a big deal. So if we can, like on a demo reel, seeing a sequence you put together and your shot design and the way you tell a story, that's always helpful.
Yeah, because the Previs crews are still fairly small, especially compared to animation. They're tiny, right? So you're going to have to wear many hats basically, and it's always nice to give people essentially their little section, right? So if you can do kind of take care of the cinematography as well, the shot design, and tell the story and just kind of make it compelling. You don't have to be the best animator, but it's always, I think a lot of people just kind of focus on animation, and it is important, it does help to tell the story. And if you don't have, if the animation is distracting, then you aren't telling the story, right? But on the other hand, it doesn't have to be this amazing final animation. And the nice thing about Previs is that you also get to play with shot design and other skills that you don't necessarily get in like a final animation house. There's a person for every job when you get to larger studios. So Previs, you get to move around laterally. So if people are applying, I think they need to just keep in mind if they're gravitating towards something, to maybe focus on that, but also try to show the scope of your skills, and not just focus on one little thing.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And then the last question we'll jump into here is they're wanting to know, were there, or if there are ever on other projects you're in, any point at which there's a misunderstanding between your part of the pipeline and what the director is asking for? How do you go about clarifying that, or kind of finding that eye to eye again with your director?
I know
that's kind of my job in a way, to be the interpreter, because these guys will meet directly with the director, but they always have way less time than it kind of takes. So I'm the one that's going to be there to answer every question whenever they need it. And so it's my job to make sure I really understand what they're looking for. You try to avoid at all costs those sorts of situations, because then none of us are doing our jobs if we're not giving the director what they're looking for. Right. Yeah, that's sort of the whole point of what we're doing is
right. Exactly. So, keying in on your role, obviously you're very effective at that. We can see it in the series. We've heard it in the way that you guys have unpacked that. What are some of the ways that you've learned about developing really strong communication and quick understanding with your director? Usually when they are doing, a bunch of different things and time is limited. What are some things that you've learned about developing that skill?
Really taking the time early in pre-production to talk through the script with them. Every director is different and how they communicate is different. So there's sort of a learning curve at the beginning of every job where, you're not always as lucky as with James, where he's just very clear and kind of lays it all out there. This is what I want. And he'll be happy if you give him that. A lot of directors and a lot of people just sort of think in different ways. The way they visualize things is different. So it's kind of, you gotta learn their language at the beginning of a job. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys in Previs as well. You just sort of, you have to kind of out how they communicate. And a lot of it is just kind of speaking stuff back to them, saying, okay, so I think what you're looking for is this. And And then if you're completely wrong, you come at it again. But gradually you kind of realize the language they speak.
Yeah, I think clearly communicating, basically communicating the ideas early is important. Putting any kind of limitations that we have, I mean, Previs, you don't always get all the bells and whistles. So I think 50% of our job is making sure that everyone's talking correctly and understanding on the same page, just kind of knowing what the goal is. I mean, it's easy. We're working in these tools that could be used for final animation. It could easily kind of go off the rails. But the point of what we're doing is to help, all these different departments and come together, kind of see their work in context, and also just making sure that the director is communicating to everyone else clearly. So, I mean, and for us, it's also important to, essentially to talk with everyone. So like you, Betsy, when you're going to have, there's going to be a lot of instances where we have to talk, we have to ask questions clearly and relay them through you. Yep. So for us, it's important that we kind of narrow it down to something that's easy to understand. So communication is definitely important. But I think openness is also very important for us, at least.
Yeah, so. And I think when there is a misunderstanding, depending on what the circumstance is, it's usually the best course of action is to, okay, we'll fix it. It's not a situation that you defend your decision or you say that's not what you said before. It's very much it doesn't matter what happened to get you here. All that matters from this moment on is where you go next. And so it's just about making sure you continue forward the right way.
We're here for the movie. We're here to facilitate the script and the story. And if you're married to your work, this isn't the field to be in, because you just can't be. You got to go. You got to iterate. It changes all the time, and so you got to kind of have a thick skin and just go with it, roll with it.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, if you're in concept, if you're in storyboards, if you're in Pre-Vis, and then even working into closer to finals. You just got to understand that your work is to some degree disposable, right? And you have to be able to just just let it go. If things change, things change. It doesn't necessarily reflect on your work. It doesn't mean that it's,
bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's just people have different ideas. Sometimes they interpret things differently. So you just pivot and you go with it. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the best way to approach it. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Would each of you, because this is something that I hear unilaterally across the board, and I also have experienced myself, is this idea of and I love the distinction you made, Ranko, between you got to have communication, but there's also openness, right? Like that, those two have to go hand in hand, and letting the ego go, dialing up the communication, being there for the project. Yep. Do you guys each find that? Because I know it's similar for me. I do some stuff with pre-production. It's almost like the process is where the fun is, like enjoying the process, as opposed to I have to make the most amazing, fantastic thing ever that everyone loves the final product. It's just you're in it with these awesome people making this amazing thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a craft, and you have to love the craft. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Find your happy place. But it is also, I mean, it's a collaborative thing. If you want it to only be your idea, you got to work on your own stuff, and if you, but if you're working with other people, that's part of it, right? You gotta take in other people's ideas, and so I mean, basically, the writer gets their ideas in, and all the way up to the animator and the effects person at the end, and whoever else. Everybody gets to put in their little token, right? So it all builds. So it's important to kind of just understand. I mean, it's always fun to kind of just push the animation as far as you can and everything else. But at the end of the day, our work gets handed off to the final vendor. They're going to have their input, and and it just kind of goes all the way up the food chain there. So I think
absolutely. And I think the project that we're here to talk about tonight, that we have talked about, is the perfect example of like when all of that comes together, and everything that you guys are saying needs to be done in those soft skills really makes it work. Jessica, Jordan, Ranko, Betsy, I want to thank you guys for your time this evening. This has been super fun. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed hearing each of you very thoughtfully unpack your role in the process. It's been a real privilege to hear from each of you. Before we go, something I always like to finish with our guests is, are there any sort of final or parting words of advice, whether those are technique or soft skill oriented, that you would give to I'm sure we have many of our students at Nounnan tuning into this stream. So for someone who's seeking the education, that's building up the skills and is aiming at let's say getting into each of the parts of the pipeline that you guys are involved with, are there any sort of final words of advice you'd like to share?
Watch lots of movies and figure out why a sequence you like is entertaining. Why does it work? And dissect it and study it. That's really, the base of it.
Yeah. I mean,
and that goes for anything.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, me personally, I would say be open to various things. You probably don't know all the jobs out there, especially if you're starting out. And where I thought I was going to be headed doesn't really turn out that way. I found a lot of interesting things along the road, and it's just been fun learning new things, going a different path. You start just finding all these different things out. I mean, honestly, live action was not on my roadmap. I mean, I was kind of in the animation mindset, and you start learning all these different things, and you start getting into it. So just be open to it, and kind of you may end up doing something completely different. And a lot of people that I know ended up doing very different things from what they thought originally. So
yeah, us for sure. We thought we were going to be Pixar animators, but this ended up being where we ended up, and I'm happy we ended up where we ended up. So, yeah.
And we are too.
Yeah, definitely. And have fun. This is the coolest business in the world. So if you're not enjoying it, then maybe it's not the right thing. Because I think we're lucky to be a part of it, and it's just it should be fun.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but also very rewarding. And again, I mean, you get to do all these wonderful things as a job, which is, I mean, you'd be doing a lot worse. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect note to finish on. So thank you again, each of you. I hope we get more Eagly in our lives. I hope that there are announcements pending in the near future where we get to see more of this fantastic story and additional things that you guys have worked on. So it's been a real pleasure to be with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe our producer is going to roll our final outro reel. So guys, we'll see you back here on the Nounnan channel for future streams. We have live streams, multiple streams happening every week. If you want to know about additional events, as well as some of our regular streams, whether that's Creature Corner or Voice in the Hollow, doing animation short in Unreal Engine, or Archetype, creating characters with Leticia Gillett. Check us out on social media. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram. We're always announcing our upcoming streams there. So thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay creative, and we'll see you back here again.
Thank you.